Beyond basic planning, what specific project management techniques are most valuable for Scrum Master or Agile Coach?
Really interesting. So just to cover the planning point first, I think a lot of people, when they think project management planning, all they can see is Gantt chart and they can't see beyond that. That's just one tool that a project manager will use. Don't get me wrong, it was a
Correct.
good one for a long time, but it's not the only one. Um,
Correct.
and again, I see a really healthy pattern of project managers or traditional project managers moving to more of that adaptive planning. And in PMP, it's often called rolling wave planning, which is very similar to running a sprint. If you consider a sprint as a micro project, rolling wave planning aligns quite nicely with that. We'll plan a very small time box, we'll minimize the risk, and we'll see what happens as we execute that. But beyond the planning stuff, there's a lot of stuff that equally can be helpful for Agilists, because there will always be a role for project management, I believe. I think we'll always need project managers in some guise. But it is sort of swinging closer towards those good Agile practices that can be adopted and brought into project management. So I'd really encourage people to go to it with an open mind. And I got some serious heat on this on LinkedIn last year, but when PMI bought Agile Alliance, I sort of saw a lot of
Yes.
panicking going on. And I said on LinkedIn, like,
Yes.
let's not burn the house down yet. Let's wait and see what happens first, because you might be pleasantly surprised. And if it all goes wrong, we can just continue to inspect and adapt and change.
Are you a Scrum Master or Agile Coach striving to make a bigger impact? It's not just about helping team in removing roadblocks anymore. Today's Agile leaders need to drive strategic initiatives, manage complex dependencies, and deliver measurable results. In today's episode, we are exploring the essential project management skills that will empower you to become a true change agent within your organization. And to guide us on this journey, we have Dave Westgarth as a guest today. Dave is a delivery expert with many certifications and extensive experience in driving successful outcomes across diverse industries under his belt. Dave's expertise spans agile delivery, team facilitation, AI integration, and stakeholder management. He's passionate about helping delivery professionals, whether they are seasoned or just starting out, to make their work more impactful and rewarding. Dave's hands-on experience in supporting complex projects, increasing team efficiency through tailored strategies and AI, and his commitments to continuous improvement make him the perfect person to guide us through the journey of essential project management. So without much ado, let's get started.
Hello, Dave. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me, Ramya and Vivek. It's been great watching your podcast, checking up on a lot of episodes, and very happy to be here. Hopefully I've got something useful I can add. Fingers crossed.
We are happy to have you, Dave. So today we would want to have a conversation with you on project management skills for Scrum Masters and Agile Coaches. So as we know, there is a lot of buzz happening around on LinkedIn and otherwise in the Agile space. And so we wanted to maybe have a conversation with you since you are also PMP certified yourself. So it would be a great conversation to have with. And so to begin with, for Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, how would the project management skill complement the effectiveness of their roles? Or does it even add to their add value to their role? If yes, then how does that complement to their role?
Good question. And I think historically, especially in Scrum and Agile circles, there's been a bit of an allergic reaction to anything project management. And I never quite understood. And I never quite understood why project management became such a dirty word. There was a lot of sort of straw manning of project managers, and I had to remind some of my Agile colleagues it's also very easy to do that to Agilists as well. But I do think as someone who's done both, there is a lot that you can glean from both. I think recently we've seen a lot of organizations sort of pull back from Scrum Masters or Agilists because there's a a little bit of a temptation there to be more servant than leader, whereas the project management outlook is very much we are there to give some level of leadership, to get stuck in, to really go for things and not be such an indentured servant to the team. There is elements of servant leadership, but the outlook is slightly different. We're much more biased towards taking action and trying to move things forward than a traditional Scrum Master may have been previously. And the other thing I really like about sort of the leadership slant or the leadership angle that project managers take, there's a lot more of the situational leadership that I see. So there's a time and place to be more directive. There's a time and place to be more coaching, to be more participatory, to be more hands-off. And I think especially for new and developing Scrum Masters, the temptation's there just to be a servant leader at all times. And yes, there is going to be times when that's the right thing to do, but equally there'll be times when you can add more value by adopting a different approach. And I think project managers are much more automatic in shifting their style to suit the team than typically what I see from new and developing Scrum Masters. There's a lot of stuff I can talk about in terms of hard skills, things like commercial skills, things like estimation techniques. Again, estimations are, there's a bit of an allergic reaction in the agile field to estimations, but before you can get to sort of a probabilistic forecast, which I think is probably the best thing to do, you do need some level of estimation to take place while you gather data and sort of build up that forecasting. But my sort of final point on this before I'm back, I think the sort of core mantra of any delivery role, whether you're a project manager, a program manager, a Scrum Master, or Agile Coach, you're there to deliver business results through a combination of technology and people. There's different sort of strands to how we do that and different techniques we'll use, but ultimately we're sort of there to serve the same purpose in a lot of ways. So I think we're a lot more alike than we are different. But looking at LinkedIn, you might believe that we're a lot more different than we are alike. So try not to get sucked into that, I would say, especially as a newer developing agilist.
Yeah. So maybe just trying to get into more details of OEIS, like, do you see a difference? And maybe I'll try to put it more context OEIS, like trying to understand is like when we talk about a project manager, right? I mean, as a skill set or a role, it is more inclined towards a traditional way of working. And again, the point here is project manager as a role, maybe it has been in existence from a long point of time and beyond IT space itself, right? I mean, maybe into different industry where they were project managers and everyone, and then when we moved into IT, obviously the role was also migrated, or maybe it was carried over here. Now, what I'm trying to understand is like when we have a traditional project management or a manager and the project management skills needed in the agile environment, right? Do you see there's a difference, or do you see no, it's still the same, irrespective of the environment or irrespective of the project an individual is handling or be part of any project? Is there a difference, or it's still the same?
I think there is a difference. So there's three broad categories I would sort of split this up into. I would split it into traditional project management, and this is still sort of prevalent in things like construction industries where we're going to do a big upfront plan and we're going to stick to that plan because once we've poured the concrete, we can't move the kitchen anymore. So there is still an element of project management that needs to happen outside of IT. There's traditional Agile, which is much more adaptive, reacts to complexity. We expect plans to change. We expect things to go wrong. We expect customers to change their mind, which is much more adaptive. And then there's an element of project management that sort of sits in between that, where project managers have tried to learn as best they can from agile ways of working, agile thinking, and try to adopt some of those and bring them into that sort of project management vehicle. And this is good for projects that aren't necessarily complex. So in the Scrum Guide, for example, there's a lot of emphasis on complex agile projects, things like product development. If you work at a consultancy or an agency, though, you won't necessarily always be doing strict product development. You may be doing other kinds of technology work where elements of project management come more into the fore. So I think there's like everything in delivery, it's a bit of a spectrum. And one thing I really like, I hope Dave Snowden doesn't watch this because I'm about to butcher his work, but the Cynefin framework, yeah, the Cynefin framework where we adapt what we're going to do based on the environment we find ourselves in. Scrum is clearly brilliant in the complex product development environment. When we take that into a complicated or worse still a simple environment, Scrum can quickly become an overhead. And project management approaches can sort of bridge the gap there. So I'm a big fan of adapting your ways of working your delivery vehicle based on the job you've got at hand. And again, there's other bits and stuff in there. So there's sort of the traditional command and control, the directive style of leadership versus the enablement and the coaching. Again, there's places for both of those. But one thing I've been quite impressed with in project management recently is the way that we define our success metrics and our success criteria. In that traditional sort of project management land, if we think we're a construction project manager and we're building a new house or a new block of flats, success in that project is conformance to the requirements. Have we done what we said we'd do in the contract? Whereas project managers who are working more in the software and the IT space, they're much more receptive now and open to success is about steady flow of value from ideation through to getting that through to the customer's hands, and thinking less about the outputs that we create, sort of less about what we said we'd do in the statement of work, and more about are we enabling successful customer outcomes, which has been a nice sort of change I've seen in the project management sphere. Sorry, I've taught you to death a little bit there. I hope that's answered your question, but you're hitting stuff I really love talking about, so I hope it's helpful.
Yes. You pointed out really correctly, right? When you talked about the type of project management that it used to be earlier, command and control versus more kind of enablement and encouraging kind of a project management or leadership, right? So I'm very curious to know over the years, even the syllabus for the project management professional, right? That is PMP is also changed over time, right? And I would say PMP now has become more agile than before, if I may say so, because now I see that though I'm not certified myself, but then obviously to learn this skill, I had studied a lot and researched a lot about PMP and PMBOK. So I could clearly understand that there is a lot mentioned about agile project management in agile space and lot of agile concepts, right? Iterative and incremental development type of projects, right? So what do you have to say on that? I mean, is my understanding correct? Is my research correct, or is it otherwise?
Yeah, you're spot on. So I did my PMP, I think 2 or 3 months ago, just around Christmas time. And I would say around half of the questions in the exam were Agile related or touched on Agile in some way. But when I did my CAPM, which is sort of the foundation PMI project management qualification, I did the CAPM at the start of my sort of tech career 5, 6 years earlier. And that was very much around memorizing the earned value formulas, memorization on project management techniques, project management leadership styles. It's much less of that now. And it's really, as you say, it's trying to sort of not be agile in and of itself, because there will always be a role for project management, I believe. I think we'll always need project managers in some guise. But it is sort of swinging closer towards those good agile practices that can be adopted and brought into project management. So I'd really encourage people to go to it with an open mind. And I got some serious heat on this on LinkedIn last year, but when PMI bought Agile Alliance, I sort of saw a lot of
Yes.
panicking going on. And I said on LinkedIn, like,
Yes.
let's not burn the house down yet. Let's wait and see what happens first, because you might be pleasantly surprised. And if it all goes wrong, we can just continue to inspect and adapt and change. I don't think this is the end
Absolutely.
of the world. In
Absolutely. I
fact,
mean, well
I'd be
said.
very. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Ramya.
No. Please continue.
I'm very hopeful that sort of new ideas will come from this cross pollination that'll continue to be more helpful and evolve us. I don't. There's a lot of people worried that PMI are trying to buy Agile and sell it, and based on what I've seen from PMI, the work that they're doing to become more agile and the work that they're doing in the AI space, I do think they're trying to serve their customers, their users, their sort of communities as best they can to help them deliver more value. Time will tell if I'm right or not, but that is sort of the direction of travel I see at the minute, and I hope that continues.
Yes, even I do feel the same. I mean, even I'm hopeful that things will go in the positive direction. I mean, it's the general human tendency, right? So whatever new change comes up, so we are all agile practitioners ourselves, and if we try to teach, we should be knowing it first, right? So whenever we try to bring in some change, there is always going to be an aversion to it or kind of a pushback to it. Not everyone would be accepting with the open arms. There would be more uh, pulling back than what people would be calling it as accepting easily, right? So that would always going to happen. But yes, I do remember your post about it, and it was spot on and wonderful post of what could be the possibilities and what are the benefits of this alliance, right? So even I have a similar thoughts on that. Um, okay, so coming back to the conversation, so you did mention about the project planning, right, or project plan some few minutes ago, right? So, and whenever we think about project management, the first thing that pop up in our minds is just project plan. So, I just want to ask that beyond basic planning, what specific project management techniques are most valuable for Scrum Master or Agile Coach?
Really interesting. So just to cover the planning point first, I think a lot of people, when they think project management planning, all they can see is Gantt chart and they can't see beyond that. That's just one tool that a project manager will use. Don't get me wrong, it was a
Correct.
good one for a long time, but it's not the only one. Um,
Correct.
and again, I see a really healthy pattern of project managers or traditional project managers moving to more of that adaptive planning. And in PMP, it's often called rolling wave planning, which is very similar to running a sprint. If you consider a sprint as a micro project, rolling wave planning aligns quite nicely with that. We'll plan a very small time box, we'll minimize the risk, and we'll see what happens as we execute that. But beyond the planning stuff, there's a lot of stuff that equally can be helpful for Agilists. The formal risk management sort of patterns and techniques that project managers apply are very useful. Agile techniques like Scrum are very good at minimizing risk just by executing the pattern. So Scrum's good at minimizing risk because we'll take a small time box, we'll minimize the scope that we're going to commit to, so there's much less that can go wrong. But having things like a RAID log, like risk response strategies, like a risk management plan, you don't need to go ultra formal on these, but just having an idea of, okay, I can see these could happen. If they do happen, this is what I'm going to do. And I can validate this with the team to see if this is a good idea or not. Instead of letting these things happen, then going to the team and saying, right, what should we do? I don't think you're adding much value as an Agilist if you're just coming to the team for every answer and not prepared to provide anything. A couple of other bits that are sort of core competencies of project managers that I sort of, especially on the Scrum Master front, I don't see enough attention being given to. One is stakeholder management. I think Scrum Masters are pretty good at managing their teams and sort of peer level relationships, but I think project managers excel in being able to do that and also manage up and down, especially the managing upwards to show, and this sort of comes back to showcasing your value to the business. I think project managers are much more naturally attuned to be able to showcase, okay, this is where this project's at, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're trying to enable, and this is how far away we are. Scrum Masters, I don't see that sort of attention in a lot of ways. I think it more often what I see is these are the stories we have in this sprint, this is what we might do next sprint, and then beyond that, it's a bit of a mystery. And the final skill, the one I like to harp on quite a bit, is the commercial aspect. I think project managers are very, very good at understanding this is how much we've invested in this project, this is what we think we'll get by doing this project, and this is how much money I've got left to play with. One of my sort of base level questions I like to ask Scrum Masters is, do you know how much a sprint costs for your team? And if you don't, you should probably ask yourself why you don't know that, because that's something that you should have some kind of feeling on. Because if you don't know how much a sprint costs for your team, how can you have any idea if you're delivering real value or not?
Yeah. Wow, that's really wonderful. Maybe the last aspect, but before that, maybe a couple of complementary practices, I would say. I mean, I'm just trying to relate to what how we operate, right? I mean, I mean, obviously, when we talk about a sprint, it's like maybe anything between a 1 week to 4 week, based on what the team is working on or what the product is all about. But obviously, from a sprint point of view, we might obviously we talk about creating value, and it might be possible, it might not be possible, again, depending on the scheme of things. Now, but when we move maybe a step ahead in terms of timelines, I mean, in terms of the release, right? I mean, what's my release plan? What's my release goal? How is it lined up, or how it is going to shape up? And that release plan might be anything, 2 months or 4 months or 6 months, based on again the client, the product, the technology, every aspect of it. Now, obviously, when we have a release plan, it's quite difficult to imagine a release or to visualize a release uh, without a Gantt chart that we were talking about, or maybe XYZ, or maybe any other complementary tools that or techniques that we have, right? We cannot imagine, or we cannot visualize it on based on our sprint, how we are lining up the sprint, what are the things we are going to, and then it also comes down to how your product backlog is being built across, right? Maybe from a Scrum Master aspect or a Scrum Master point of view, it might be, as you were talking, right? Maybe a Scrum Master is more inclined or is more aware about how your sprint backlog is lined up or is shaping up, or how your product backlog is shaping up for the next 1 or 2 sprints, based on or depending on how the team is refining the backlog, right? So maybe that's the limitation a Scrum Master puts himself or herself into that aspect. And that is where, if you want to be more realistic in terms of how you are planning, or you're going into maybe the different aspects or the complementary practices that you were proposing, comes into handy in taking care of it, right? So coming back to the point that you said, right, how a scrum, whether as a Scrum Master, are you aware about how much the investment cost is, and the investment cost is how much you as an organization is spending in sprinting for an entire sprint? What's the cost involved? Well, if you're not aware about it, how do you determine, what's the outcome in terms of the value? I mean, what's the X amount of investment that you are doing, and what's across that X investment, what is the value that is being created, right? So that's where I think, as a Scrum Master or a coach, we lag. One, because we are not directly involved into the budget aspect of it, right? And I don't think so anyone has proposed it, or anyone has stopped us getting into it. But I don't know why people don't get into that aspect of things. But that's a very important aspect of understanding what's the value creation over here in terms of the X amount or the X investment that goes across it, right?
No, I like that, because you're absolutely right. I think it's an artificial barrier, because especially when I'm in sort of the project manager role on an assignment or an initiative, if anyone was to come to me and say, "Can you walk us through the budget and show us where we are?" Personally, I'd love to, because now you'll have a much deeper appreciation for if I'm being more demanding, or if I'm more hands off, you'll probably get an instinct for why, depending on where we are in the budget, because I might need to start applying myself a little bit more robustly if the budget's starting to run out and we aren't getting results. Equally, if we're in good shape on the budget and we seem to be hitting all our milestones, we can adapt that leadership style, as I touched on, and be a little bit more hands off and give a little bit more coaching. But that's a really sort of, I think this is where Scrum Masters do themselves a disservice, because if you want to be a Scrum Master forever, you probably don't need to touch on the budget stuff. You can skate by without it. But if you want to eventually become, say, a head of a department or a VP or even a C-suite person, you're going to become responsible for a P&L, a profit and loss statement. So you need to develop these budgetary skills so you can flex your muscles there. And ultimately, it's if you're part of a team and you don't know how much your sprints are costing, but you know roughly how much value you generate at the other end, you could conceivably be spending more than you're generating. So you could be investing more money than the money that you're getting back from the fruits of your labor. If you do that over a long enough course of time, you will be finished. You can't continue to spend more than you generate in perpetuity. And yeah, I think it's a really clear and obvious gap that I sort of can't understand why more Scrum Masters aren't prepared to get stuck in there, because it's a really easy gap to plug once you've got a sort of fundamental level of knowledge under your belt. So I'd love to see more of that.
Absolutely. I would just like to add to what you mentioned, Dave. It's like you are in a team and you don't know. I mean, when you say yourself a leader, right? And be it a Scrum Master, an Agile Coach, it's not a team player kind of a position. It's a leadership position, right? If you're a leader and you don't know that how much are we spending to get something out, as Vivek mentioned, a release out, or maybe delivering value in a release. It's as good as you living in your home and you don't know how much you spend in a month, right? So it's as basic as that. So and as you both mentioned that it's not that anyone has stopped us from getting into it. It's just that we have restricted ourselves, saying that these are my boundaries, these are my roles and responsibilities as maybe an agile coach or a scrum master, and I'm not going to go beyond this. So this is what typically happens, right? So now what I want to ask is, now if assume that I'm a scrum master, I don't know anything about budgeting or financing P&L, right? So what is the first step that a scrum master or an agile coach must take towards learning that? Who do they reach out to within the team, or maybe in terms of learning, or maybe knowing the stuff? So what is the first step towards that learning about finances?
So in most Scrum teams, if they're trying to operate as true to the guide as they can, I would say your product owner should be your first port of call, because they should be hopefully the owner of the P&L for the product that you're working on. If you're not quite working in that traditional environment where you've got the PO, the SM, and the developers, and you're doing real product development, you may need to go to other people, like a program manager, like a head of department, maybe even a VP. But by reaching out to these people, you'll end up in the right place, and then you can start asking some of these fundamental questions, like what is the rough order of magnitude on the cost per sprint for the team I'm working on? How do we measure the impact that I'm making in a commercial sense? How do you guys see a return on that investment? When do we expect to get that return on investment? How long is the payback period going to be? And this is the type of stuff, you've mentioned the PMP a couple of times, so I'll just go again. This is a really sort of nice bolt on that the PMP will give you. A lot of the commercial language that VPs and execs speak, and a lot of the sort of almost like a glossary, almost like the Scrum glossary of, if you want to develop your commercial acumen, these are the questions you should ask, these are the topics you should familiarize yourself with, and these are the data points that you need to make effective decisions commercially. So yeah, there's a hell of a lot in the PMP that you can do. But similarly to what we'd do to developers, if you wanted to understand more technically, you would go and ask your developers, can you show me what you're doing at a technical level? I wouldn't be scared to do that with your product owners, your VPs, your head of departments either, because they will appreciate that if anyone else can come in and lighten the load commercially. I mean, personally, I'm always happy to take any help, and I'm sure most other people would be the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe obviously while you were talking, I mean, from the beginning of this conversation, obviously we realized that there's a one important aspect where the budgeting aspect is overlooked as a from a Scrum Master point of view or from a coach point of view. Obviously, that becomes one of the challenges, or maybe one of the impact area I would call, where as a Scrum Master we lack. What are the other skills from a project management aspect that you feel that a Scrum Master or a coach also needs to have under his belt, so that it becomes much more easier for them, or it also becomes for an effective way to have everything in a managed in a better way, right? Would you like to talk about those lagging skills that you feel that we also need to have as a Scrum Master?
I'm not sure I would frame it as lagging skills. I would probably frame it as a different focus, because the way I'm going to talk about this more on LinkedIn at some point this year, I hope. But the way I sort of see it is, we've got sort of the core, what would you call it? The core skill set, the core discipline, the core competencies of delivery. And depending on the role you've got, you'll lean more heavily to some or the other. And the role that I'm sure you're seeing more and more now is delivery management, which for me is a little bit of a catch-all. And I've seen some people criticize that as they basically want project managers who can do, they want one person who can do everything, which I can sort of sympathize with. I'm sure there are some organizations that just want people who can do everything. But equally, I think that a lot of us who are in Agile or in project or in Agile delivery or Scrum delivery roles, this should be seen as quite exciting, because if you're looked at as a delivery manager, an organization, for me, is now placing trust in you to select the right tools for the job that you've got at hand. So now you're not being brought in as a Scrum Master who's going to force Scrum in and make it work no matter what. You're not being brought in as a project manager who's going to get a plan and you're going to force reality to conform to that plan. You're being brought in as a skilled, experienced professional with a multitude of techniques and sort of abilities, multifaceted skills that you can then draw on depending on what the job is at hand, depending on what the team is, depending on your skill and experience level. So I personally look at it as this should be quite exciting to be able to have that freedom to select what's right depending on the job you've got in front of you. Does that make sense? I hope it does.
Yes, yes, definitely. So maybe last two questions before we wrap up this conversation. Obviously, we talked about what should be done in terms of gaining these project management skills, right? And now what I want to get into is while they are on their learning path, as in while the Scrum Masters and Agile coaches are there on the learning path, what are some common pitfalls that they fall into when lacking project management skills, and how can they be avoided?
Good question. Good question. I think there's a temptation, especially in sort of when you're a development Scrum Master or a development Agilist, that you see a new idea and you think, right, this is the answer, I'm going to go with it. And I see a lot of Scrum Masters go through this when they first read the Scrum Guide. They think, okay, this will work. They try and apply it. It comes into reality. It doesn't quite work as nicely as they expect it to. And then they'll stumble across something else, like, say, Kanban, for example. And now we run from this side of the room to this side of the room. And we say, right, forget Scrum. Kanban's the way to go. And so on and so on. And I think the temptation to try and outsource all of your decision making and thinking to a framework or an approach you can't give in to that temptation. There's a reason that we need project managers, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches. It's because we need people who can come in, make effective decisions, help and coach teams to deliver more value. And if it was that the Scrum guy covered all those bases for you, we probably wouldn't need Scrum Masters, to be brutally honest. The product owner and the development team would get on without us if Scrum was enough. Scrum's clearly not enough. Project management's not enough. Kanban's not enough. All of these approaches are filled with good ideas and good tools for you to call on. But to be a truly effective delivery professional, you can't let those take you on a ride. You've got to use them judiciously as and when the situation calls. So try to resist the temptation to think, okay, I found the Holy Grail this time, this one's going to work. Take what's good out of them. If there's anything that doesn't work, try and look for new ways. And eventually you'll come to something that's unique to the team, the product, and the practitioner, i.e. you, that will work for the team. So a combination of not outsourcing your thinking at the framework and taking on that experimentation mindset. I think those are the two key things to go into as you start this sort of bring these project management skills into your repertoire and into your skill set.
Vivek, would you like to ask the last one?
Go ahead, Ramya, go ahead.
All right. So I like that idea, what you mentioned, Dave, that obviously we get overwhelmed, or maybe we just kind of get excited whenever we learn new thing, right? It's like, oh, now I learned this tool or maybe this technique, let me go and implement it, right? So that's what happens whenever we try to learn new thing. But what we need to understand is, first, put it to our context. Second, have a balance of everything, right? So not everything would be suiting to your project needs, or not everything would be perfect fit for you. But what we need to understand is, now it's like we have this toolbox with all the tools. Figure out which tool is important for us, and then accordingly implement to put to the context, right? So maybe the last question for this conversation is, how do you think project management skills will be important in the context of Agile with AI integration? Another buzzword.
Yeah, and it's this is the $1 million question at the minute. Yeah. So there's a lot of what I would call sort of the manual or transactional elements of project management that took place before. Things like creating a risk register, creating a RAID log, putting together a Gantt chart, monitoring the budget. I think there's a hell of a lot of scope for AI to come in and help you there. And not only can it help you by doing things for you, it can also probably coach you a little bit and show you where you could go and what you could do differently and flag those risks that may be hidden to you. I did a talk last year called AI Powered Agile, and one thing I talked about was status reports. So, really interesting thing happened. I was running I don't know if you've heard of AWS Party Rock, but it's an application that you can use to generate AI powered applications. And I tried to create one to help me create status reports. And it was pretty good,
Wow.
actually. It was pretty good. It could give you sort of the description of the project, the risks, the assumptions, the issues, the dependencies, and format them nicely, which was dead nice. But as I was experimenting, I sort of thought, what would happen if I was to give this 3 or 4 weeks worth of a status report? I gave it sort of more and more, and over time, what you'll find is the AI can even build up a narrative of what's happening on your project over time. So it can sort of see weeks 1 to 3, this was a problem that seems to have gone away. Weeks 2 to 4, we've got an issue rising here that continues to rise. And it can start to sort of make those predictive analytics and unearth those hidden themes for you as well. So I think the temptation with AI is to, I don't know if either of you have worked on RPA type work before, but everyone I speak to in IT seems to have done some level of RPA. The temptation seems to be whatever RPA was good at, let's just plug AI in instead and see what it can do. I think AI probably can do that, but there's a hell of a lot more around this sort of coaching and using it as a personal assistant, as that expert tutor to get you to accelerate your learning a little bit quicker. But also when you think of your T-shaped skills, let's consider you as an individual with no AI. You'll have a subset of T-shaped skills of whatever description. When you've got that AI-powered tooling, your T-shaped skills, immediately the floor goes up slightly because the
Wow.
AI-powered tool's got experience in so much more than you do, and it's got so much more knowledge that it can call on. It's never going to be a perfect oracle in my view, but immediately you elevate all of your wider base T-shaped skills up a couple of notches, which I think is really powerful as well.
Wow, that's a wonderful thought, I would say. Yes, I mean, I think we need to think into that direction. As in, one is you put very rightly that all our risk registers, Gantt charts, and whatnot, most of our documentation can be done through AI. Second is to improve our skill set, right? From moving from T shape to I shape or M shape or whatever we may want to call. I think that's a wonderful addition, I would say. Uh, and also, I think this buzz is going to be there for some time. It happens with every new invention, right? So
Yeah.
whenever a new thing comes up, so we all go, oh, this is going to take our jobs. And it's like people who don't use that will be replaced by the people who use AI. That's what I would like to say, right? Otherwise, it's nothing to be scared of. People kind of deny something because they are scared of not knowing it, right? So I think that's just us being insecure because of this new thing. I think it is definitely going to help us. And I think for this conversation, that is it. And I believe that there were so many pointers that we triggered from this conversation, and we just scratched this surface by just touching upon few things. But we would definitely want to have another conversation to detail it out and flesh out whatever we have spoke about. So many things that we talked about. So thank you so much, Dave, for coming over and doing this podcast with us. It was wonderful talking to you.
No, it's been great, and I hope if nothing else, I've stopped that sort of allergic reaction to project management. There is some good stuff in there. Just don't be scared to try it. But no, it's been great. Thank you very much for having me on, Vivek and Rami. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, looking forward to hearing what people think of this.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.